Welcome everybody. Um, so and at the moment, but we're going to be continuing on the on the go bag. This is the bag I've been on over the last few lives. We have finished, or you've watched me go through and fit the front flap, which actually, even though you can't see it, it has a magnetic snap right here. And we're going to install the other side of the magnetic snap on the front of the bag today. And so we're going to put together the front and back of the bag. And then next week we will attach the front and back to the zipper panel that we finished the last time we were working on this bag. And then we will bind it. And that will be finishing up the bag. So to start with the front, as I said, these have a magnetic snap. This is a sew-in. Now, it doesn't come with a piece of white on it. This is double stick tape, and I'll explain why I have this on here right in just a minute. But this is a sew-in magnetic snap. So this is just a, and so just if you want to see how it fits, so this is the front flap, which already has the magnetic snap installed. That's how it will adhere together. So for our front, we have two pieces that are the same exact size, and this is the On the Go 2.0 by Annie. It actually, the instructions will tell you how to measure down for both the front. And so I have the front piece and I have my other piece, which is actually identical, but we do all our markings on the lining side because we're putting in card slots. So if you can see, I've done markings already. But for this one, this is the front. This is where we're going to put, and you're like, oh, you're going to be able to see all those lines. You're not when we're done. Hi, Beth. So as I said, this is the front. And now if you have a directional print, now Tula Pinks can go, as you can see, it can go either way. I just like this direction, so we're going to do this. But we have for the front, we have all our lines marked so we can put our magnetic snap. And what we're going to do, the reason I got two pieces of double-sided tape is to put one here, and then we're going to cover it, the piece of SF-101. And because this is plastic, you don't fuse it, but we're going to sew it down. And then the other pieces we need for this are our ID window, and this is our front facing that will cover up that magnet and you won't be able to see that it's there. Okay. So what I'm going to do first, as you can see, there is a perfectly marked off square that fits inside of. So we are going to take the back off our double-sided tape and stick that on that square. I'm going to double check that that's the right side with my flap. I'm not, hold on. Let's see. Sorry. I'm not sure. It might be the Wi-Fi is a little wonky today, Melody. So that's probably what that is. So just so we can see, our magnetic snap is other than the fact it's not sewn, it's in the right location. So we have the double-sided tape on this side. So what we're going to do now, you could use like a little bit of basting glue. I just use double-sided tape because that's my preferred choice. But so we're going to actually, hold on, me not thinking about it. Need to cover that. Didn't mean to peel that stickiness off. We're going to stitch this down at a eighth of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Then we're going to take our fusible side down and stitch that on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now we'll move to the machine. Hopefully all of y'all can see and hear me better now. Okay, so we're just going to sew. And as I've explained before, when I sew, I have what's called a narrow foot on my machine. And so it is automatically an eighth of an inch wide. So I just put the edge of my foot up against the edge of the thing, the magnetic snap. So we're just going to go all the way around. The main reason I covered that double side tape back up, I just didn't want to get something stuck to it while I'm sewing it. Because I have done that before. Okay. We're going to trim that thread. I love the narrow fit. That's my favorite thing. So we'll trim our threads on the back. Yeah, with the narrow foot, I don't have to switch to a zipper foot unless I really want a super close. So now we're going to use what we call our magnet cover, or in this case, it is SF101, and that's just to make sure you don't have anything that's going to rub up against your fabric and possibly cause a tear. So we're going to take our paper off of our double-sided tape and cover up our magnet. It is exactly the same size as our magnet. But as I said, we can't fuse it because it is adhering it to plastic. So now that it's stuck in place, as you can see, stuck in place over my magnet, I'm going to go around at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is basically right around the magnet. That down. But next week we should finish this bag completely all the way around, which will be very fun to see what it looks like. Okay, we'll trim our seam allowance and trim our threads off the back. So if you see, there's the front and there's the back. So you can see if I go in close, you can see those two squares outlining each other. All right, so the next thing that we do is we are going to take, this is what's called our front facing right here. Yeah, it does have SF101 on the back. And what we're going to do is we're going to line it up. What also we use those markings for, we're going to line up the bottom, or should I say the top, what is going to be the bottom when we fold it up, of the front facing right here. And we're going to sew that on at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I will go ahead and sew that and show you what I mean. Hold on, getting it in place. Now, in the case of this SF-101, the SF-101 was exactly a quarter inch smaller around on all sides from the front facing. So basically, you can almost use that as a seam guide for your quarter inch seam allowance. Okay, so we have that sewn. As you can see, it is a quarter inch seam allowance. And what we're going to do, we're going to actually press this up. Now, since I have the magnet there, I'm not going to take an iron to it. I'm actually going to finger press it up, and I'm going to then base that down. Or actually, not just across the top, but I'm going to start at one side and go all the way around and down. And what that'll do, that will hold our, it will hide our magnet. So we are going to sew it at a eighth of an inch seam allowance. And we're going to go all three sides. We can bind it down. Now, do not worry about the raw edge. It will be taken care of when we put our ID window on, which is what our other markings are for. I'm going to trim the excess threads on the back. Right, so as you can see, it has been completely covered up. You can't see the magnet or anything like that. So our next part, we have our ID window. Now, one thing that they had you do, so if you notice, what's going to happen is that this is where your ID window is going to go, right above that magnetic snap. Now, what we did, we prepared this window before. They have you put double-sided tape or you put glue on all parts but where you're going to have for your opening for an ID window. So you have doubles. I have doubles. This is eighth of an inch wide double-sided tape that I get from Wizardry or geekyhardware.com. Wizardry Stitchery. So I have eighth of an inch right in the center, and I'm going to put that down. So the only problem with eighth an inch wide, sometimes the backing does not like to come off. So you go to the other end. So I'm going to pull off all the backings. Now this is a case where we do pull all the backings off at one time. And basically this is going to hold it in place while we stitch it down. So this has a correct order to stitch this down apparently. So I'm going to be looking at the directions as I stitch this down because it has you follow a certain path to get this on. All right, so what we're going to do, we have a line that's marked 2 inches from the top. We are actually going to line this up at the top here. So, and we are getting that all stuck down. And we go one more. Make sure everything's stuck down where it should be. And if you look, our raw edge that we just had from the magnet is now going to be covered up by this. So as you can see, we have everything double-sided on there. So it has a very, we're going to go a little bit at a time. This is sewn at 1/8 of an inch around, and we just go following the line, and we're going to start in the, if you look, we're going to start in the left corner on the bottom. We're going to go and follow basically this line all the way down and up and go all the way around and back down and around again. Except we don't actually go up top here because this is going to be where we actually insert our ID. So I will show you all the stitching once I have completed going all the way around. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. I said I'm sitting here looking at the directions, making sure I'm going the right direction to follow. Make sure everything's in the right stitching order. So we are going, so we've attached the first part. And we just take our time so you make sure you're going in the right direction as well as staying at your 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay. And we are going all around. This is probably going to be the most tedious part of tonight, but we have got our way around and we've about adhered everything, but now we're going to go back and do the second line of stitching so that it will be good and tacked down, just as the pattern has us do. There are any questions so far, feel free to ask. In some ways, you could say we are following the stitching that we did on the ID holder previously, with a few extra stitches thrown in. Okay. We'll do our last set of stitches and then I will show where we are at. Okay, and we are going to trim that thread on both the front and back. And so there we have all the stitching, and of course I had thread there. But as you can see, this is our ID window and it's very secure. And if you want to look on the back side, you can see where the stitching is. So it's very secure. We have no raw edges here anymore because it is buried underneath here. So now that we have this adhered, we can trim our excess binding off, even with our, just to make it even. Apparently I flung fabric trimming things off. All right. So our front is now complete. So now what we do, we are going to mark our centers on all four sides. And this will play into part later. Okay, so also in the pattern, I'll show you, you're given a template. And this is just so you can see. And most of her patterns have this as a 2.5-inch circle template. And this is so you can round your corners like we already have used for the front flap. And I have already trimmed, I've already marked those on there, both sides. And I'm going to trim those off after we get our centers marked. So I'm actually going to take and mark my centers with pins. There's one and two. And then we're going to mark our long sides, or the actual sides, and we've marked our top and bottom already. But once we have marked our centers and trimmed the curve off, of course that got caught in the quilting. You could do this without quilted fabric, but you would still have to bind everything because the foam is what adds in the quilting is what adds the body to the bag. But you could just baste all 3 layers together instead, but with your lining and your thing. Let's make sure that's right. Had to pull that pin out. It wasn't quite centered. Okay. So we have our centers marked, all 4 centers. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim the edge, and then we're going to do what we call sealing the edges, which is basically doing a eighth of an inch seam allowance or eighth of an inch seam all the way around. And that seals all our edges in, and that makes it where, like, when you're doing binding and everything like that, it'll be nice and smooth. And also when you're combining it to like the zipper channel. So we have our nice rounded. So now we're going to do a eighth of an inch seam all the way around just to, as I call it, sealing the edge. It also helps the foam to lay flatter in the seams. So we're just gonna go a quick eighth of an inch all the way around. And of course, this is outside of our or inside our seam allowance. So this is not something you see, but it keeps it from unraveling. As you can see, it kind of gets fluffy right here where there has nothing holding it down. So this is just sealing it, makes it lay flatter while we're doing all our combining and everything. Okay. And we're just gonna go. Now that doesn't stop it from fraying or anything, but it stops it from being quite as bulky, I found, and like layers separating. So as you can see, it makes it lay a little flat, and we're good to go. So the front side is done. This is the front of this bag. So when we actually, just to pan out a little bit, when we were to put our front panel on, this is how the front of the bag will look. Of course, it will actually be attached to a zipper panel at that point, but we're getting there. But our magnets march up, which is why I can hold that and it holds stays together in place. Okay, so we can set both of those to the side for the moment. We're not going to do anything else with the front for tonight. Now, what we need for the back part, well, we have the other panel that is exactly the same size. We have our card slots. We have 3 of them that we've prepared beforehand. We have our bound pocket. This is a bound slip pocket that is bound at the top, and we're going to use this on the back. We're not using it quite yet, and we will also use our flap and adhere that to the back. But first things first, as I said before, we have marked a distance from either side, and this is to help us to, so if you can see, it's hard to see. Now these are heat erasable pins. Using heat, you can erase them. And I'll take my iron to this afterwards to get rid of any extra. But they have you mark 1.5 from the top, and then you mark 3 different markings below that. And that's for 1, 2, 3 pockets. And that's the reason you mark from the lining, because this is going to be our card slots in the back of the bag. So we are going to, here's our first one. That's going to be our front one. So I'm going to get my one that I want to be the back one. That's my back one. So we are going to, and I am actually going to pin this in place once on each side. And the big thing is making sure not to sew across the top. So we are going to get our pockets in here. Okay, there's one and there's two. Just to show you how the first one. And so what we're going to do is we're going to sew at an 1/8 inch seam allowance all the way around here and up. And we're going to do that for each pocket. Okay, let's get this down just a tad. Apparently I missed trimming a thread. Okay, which happens. All right. So we are going to sew this down at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you do back stitch. And we're going to sew across. I'm using my top stitching from the previous step of putting those together to make sure I'm at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay. I'm going to do this with each one of the pockets. So I will take the next pocket and place it. Now, if you feel comfortable enough, like I do for the most part, to just hold it in place while you sew, then go ahead and do it. Okay. Put that pocket on. Okay. And we stitch this one at an 1/8 of an inch as well. Hope everyone is having a good night tonight. Okay, just to show what this one looks like. Are there any questions so far? So just to show, we have one, two pockets, and we're going to sew our last pocket on. Okay, and I've got that in place. Are there any requests after this bag is done to for a bag they would like to see done? I like sewing doll clothes, Melody. I'm actually about to start a test for a backpack pattern actually this next week. Can't share that, but I am going to be testing it this next week. Mm. Yep. Trimming our threads on the back. Or actually, should I say the front since we sewed on the back. So just to show you, here are our card slots. We have 3 card slots. Okay, so now what we're gonna do at this point, so what I'm gonna go ahead and go do and kind of use my iron to erase all these markings. They're no longer needed. Our next step is to put our bound pocket, flipped pocket onto it, which is why I want to go ahead and get rid of these markings now before I add another layer. And they are coming off, no problem. The only thing you should know is if you use heat erasable pens, that if it gets cold enough, the markings will show back up again. Not everybody realizes that. I've only had it happen a couple times. You can use other ones that disappear in time with just um, being exposed to air. I have some that are awesome for that as well. I say these are my favorite ones that are not the heat erasable ones. These are Marvy fabric markers. They have one end that's a color, and you actually will take this and it basically erases it. Mm, like I said, it always, just to show, all the markings are now gone for this one. Like I said, but there have been in quilting groups and stuff like that that I've read that sometimes if things get cold, they'll show up. So the best way are the ones that are fully go away over time, either like disappearing ink or water soluble, where they you can basically take a damp cloth and wipe them away. But you also got to take into account your materials you're working with cotton. That usually works fine. Um, I have these both in pink and purple. I found a place I ordered them from. I don't know if you can get them off Amazon. Uh, I used to get them at a fabric shop that's no longer exists anymore. But these are great. But let's see if I've got a piece of fabric around and I could show you what I mean. Scrap fabric. Of course, I don't now that I want one. But just to show, here, I've got a little piece of fleece right here, just to show how it works. So you do the mark just to see, then you take the white end and it's gone. So you can see that over time it will actually start to get the color. These are Marvy. That's the brand. Let's see if I can get a good image. Erasable fabric markers. They're made in Japan, if that helps. But I have them in both pink and purple. Some things don't show up. Okay, so our next step is that we're going to, so we've got our card slots. We're going to take and line up our edges, making sure that your card slots are at the top. We're going to pin this together. And we are going to use an 1/8 inch seam allowance and attach our slip pocket. And if you notice, all our seams from the card slots are now covered by the slip pocket. So we're just going to pin this all the way around. And now I'll sew that together. I do understand wanting to find good erasable pins. Those are my favorite. I have to restock. I just don't remember where I got it the last time. Previously, I got it from a fabric shop called Mary Jo's, but they went out of business about 5 years ago after being in business since the 40s. Um, the owner passed away and her son just didn't want to continue it. So we have our slip pocket, and what we're going to do is we're going to sew all the way around at 1/8 inch seam allowance. If you're wondering what I'm doing, is that I have already made my marks to make the curves for this. So I'm going 1/8 of an inch. I'm saving myself a step, and I'm going ahead and sewing 1/8 of an inch inside of the curved marks that I will be cutting off so that I don't have to seal the edges again later. And I'll show you what I mean when I get done sewing it, and then we'll trim them off. It's just cutting one step out. Mm. Okay, and we're just gonna finish sealing the edges while we're going around. So like I said, for the front and back, we are rounding the corners at the bottom to give our bag a rounded finish. So as I did previously, I have already marked the curve for both ends. And I went ahead when I was attaching my pocket, went ahead and sewed 1/8 of an inch inside where I'm going to cut. So that was one less step. I didn't have to go back and do that again. Trim our corners. Okay, so we have our back with the nice rounded corners. If I get all the fabric. I didn't cut through all the layers. Makes a difference. There we go. Nice rounded corners. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to mark our centers, just like we did on the front. Of course, I buried my pins underneath that fleece I was demonstrating the marking pen with. Now, those marking pens that I just showed you, they do disappear after a few days, but if you wanted to take the markings off them instantly, they come off with the white tip. And I find they're better than any of the Dritz ones or anything like that. Like I said, the brand is Marvy, Marvy. We're gonna mark our center down here at the bottom. And then we're gonna mark our ones on our sides. But as far as the heat erase pens, I usually use the Dritz brand. That that will be one of the things I miss from Joann's because that's usually where I get those once they are completely gone. Okay, so we have our centers marked, and we're going to make sure to mark our center of our flap as well. Okay, at the top. And then we're going to lay it so that our main fabrics are right sides together. So, in other words, so when it closes, it'll be over and it'll be right sides. So we're going to put right sides together, and this is our back and our flap. Okay, and all we do here is we're going to baste across at an eighth of an inch seam allowance, or not baste, sew across at an eighth of an inch seam allowance. Okay, we still have our centers marked up at the top. So as I said, then you will actually have this over. That will be the front of the bag. So there's your back, the top, and we have our slip pocket. We have our card slots. So, and that's where we're going to stop for tonight. So not quite as long as we do a lot of times. I understand finding ones. Actually, I only recently in the last year or so found the purple ones. I had used the pink ones, and most of them had started to dry out after having them for like 5 years, or I had run out of the ink that was in them, and I couldn't get more since, like I said, the place I used to get them from went out of business. But I luckily found it. I just don't remember where exactly I got them from. So, so tonight we finished our front of the bag with our ID slot, and our hidden magnetic snap is right here. And then we have our back of the bag with our flap attached. So we have the back of the bag with the flap attached. And then next week, we will combine those with the zipper loop to finish our bag, and we will put the last of our binding on to finish it up. So there's not a lot left in this bag. I just don't think we need to go for another hour tonight to do that. So we will continue this next week, and then we'll be done and we'll be moving on to something else. So I will see y'all soon. Are there any questions before I head out? If not, I will see y'all again next week. And thanks for joining me.